Hey guys, my name's Gloria and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me on another October video. So following on from the last couple of days videos, I want to do another video where I go through a couple of books I took from recommendations from other booktube channels. This will be the last one for this month, but I am excited to look into more booktube channels for the next coming months as well. So today's channel that I've chosen is Sam Dawson's How Do Reading channel. He just started his channel this year. He's from Australia and he doesn't have a specific genre that he reads. He did a 12-part series first where he sort of took a slightly more academic look at some classic and some newer books from several different genres, and the books I've chosen today, one was from his crime thriller video and the other was from his horror video. So he reads a lot of things, he does a lot of cool things on his channel, so you should definitely check him out. But the books I want to talk about today are Out by Natsuo Kirino, which was translated by Stephen Snyder, and Cujo by Stephen King. So I'm going to talk about Out, I think, first. So this was a brand new one for me. I had never heard of it until I saw it on Sam's channel, and the way he described it, I was thoroughly intrigued by it, so I thought I would pick it up. It was written by a Japanese female author, and I think it was in the late 90s that it was first published, but it was only translated in the early 2000s, and I'm very grateful that it was translated. It centers around the story of a woman who has two small children and a husband who doesn't treat her very well, and she ends up strangling him to death, and because of the circumstances of her life and how she's had to get by, she doesn't have very many close friends, so she asks someone who works in the factory with her, another woman, to help her cover up the crime pretty much. And through certain circumstances, two other women from their group at the factory also get pulled into this, and this sets off this chain of events that is just mind-blowing to me. The story begins with covering up the murder of this man, but it certainly doesn't end there, and there are so many different twists and turns to it. It really taught me a lot about Japanese culture and how things go there. I had to sort of change the way I thought about a lot of things, because I forgot that a lot of Japanese people don't sit in chairs, they just sit on the ground, so a lot of times I had to sort of change the way I was imagining things in their houses and the factory they work in and stuff. But it was also rather fascinating just the way that there's an absolute obsession in this book, and I think in Japanese culture, but I mean all over the world, we're obsessed with women's youthfulness and younger women and young beautiful women, but in this book it is just in your face the entire time. People are constantly judging each other on their age. It's so important for the characters in this book, and they're constantly judging people for not trying to look younger, for trying to look younger. There are men in this book who openly are disgusted by any woman over 25. It was very uncomfortable and bizarre that a lot of the men in this book are just openly trying to sleep with high school children, like teenagers, constantly. They would specifically state high schoolers in like school uniforms. Very bizarre, very odd, and pretty much any woman, if you're not conventionally attractive, first of all, you may as well just leave. There's nothing for you there. And if you start to age, which is inevitable, you're just done for. Nobody wants to cut you any breaks or give you any good jobs or anything like that. It was just very in your face, very straightforwardly told in the minds of these characters and stuff, and yeah, it was kind of scary because I'm 27 and I would definitely be out in that. The book's called out in that culture, but it's got definitely some feminist themes in it. It's 4 women dealing with some horrible lifestyles, some abusive partners, family members who are constantly taking advantage of them, the fact that they all work the night shift in this factory, and there's there is some man who's been hanging around where they have to walk to their factory to try and attack women, and it's just something that they have to deal with. They have to start walking in pairs and stuff because that's just what women have to do when they're trying to go to work at this really terrible midnight hours and stuff. And they're completely out of sync with the rest of their families and the rest of the world pretty much, because they work during the night and they sleep during the day, and this sort of living in darkness really creeps into other parts of their lives and sort of alienates them from a lot of people. The 4 women themselves are all quite different, and they have very different personalities. So Yayao is the woman who did end up killing her husband. She's been quite beaten down by her husband and by society's expectations of her, and trying to be a good mother and a good wife, and her husband still goes off and spends all their savings on gambling and prostitutes. So she breaks, she kills her husband, and she immediately calls Misako, and Misako is quite an imposing character. She's one of the women that works in the factory. She used to be quite high up, well, as high up as she could get in a credit union kind of company, and she tried to get higher, but she was getting older and people didn't like women who weren't constantly smiling and being nice to their male counterparts, so she eventually got fired from that. She's dealing with her own husband and son just not speaking to her. They're all living in the same house, but they're all living very separate lives, and she's seen as the one that's in control, the one who always knows the right thing to do, and she just gets things done. In doing this, she calls in one of the other women from the factory, who's known as the skipper. She is the one that stands at the head of the line, and she sort of dictates how quickly things need to go in the factory. She's an incredibly hard worker. She's one of the older women, she's in her 50s, and as such she's sort of, people rarely think of her, but she lives with her young daughter who's constantly trying to get money out of her, even though they're pretty much living in poverty. She has to take care of her invalid mother-in-law because her husband died, and that means changing her diapers, constantly looking after her and taking abuse from her. And through some not so great circumstances, they also have to accept the help of another person who works with them at the factory, who isn't as reliable. She's incredibly selfish. She wants to know everything that's going on. She doesn't like being left out, and she is incompetent, and she is buried with debt because she is obsessed with buying things and getting loans to buy things, and she doesn't see anything wrong with that kind of thing. So it becomes a whole mess, but these 4 women have to deal with this, and they're all quite different. They're all playing off each other, and they all have their own motives for wanting to help in this, or feeling like they need to help in this, and they all have certain things that they want to get out of it as well. So Out for me was fantastic. I was locked into the story from the first page. There's also dealings with some dangerous characters in this as well, possibly Yakuza or people who have been involved with the Yakuza in the past. There's such a large cast of characters, and they all have very specific things that they do, but it's told in such a way that you are enthralled by all of it, and you really want to know where it's going, and it just keeps taking turns and keeps going in different directions that you're not expecting, and there's just such a richness to the story in this book. I just think it's great. I think everyone should read it. I think it's really a fantastic thriller, and I was disgusted and compelled, and I felt sorry for them, and I was angry at some of them, and it just I think it's just a great book, and I've been trying to read more thrillers as well, so this was definitely a great thriller for me to read. So thank you to Sam for making a video on that, because that's the only reason I read it. Next up we have the classic Cujo by Stephen King. I have pretty much been avoiding this for a very long time because it's about a rabid dog. So for anyone who doesn't know, the story of Cujo is that there is this beautiful Saint Bernard dog who is owned by a mechanic and his son and his wife, and in the story there's a lot of different things going on with all the different characters, but there is a husband and wife, and they have a young son. The husband needs to go away on a business trip, and the wife's car is acting up, so she takes the car and her son to the mechanic's house. But what she doesn't already know is that Cujo, who has before been a complete puppy dog, he's such a nice dog, he would never harm anyone, has been bitten by bats that had some sort of strain of rabies. So there's already been some violence at the house. There are no people there anymore, but Cujo is there, and just as she gets to the house, her car breaks down, and she is now stuck inside of this car with her 4-year-old son and this rabid dog outside, and she has to try and either fight him off, get to the house so she can call someone, or survive long enough that someone will come and rescue her. And as Stephen King stories go, a lot of things are put into play that mean that nobody's looking for her. No one has realized that her and her son are missing. Nobody knows that she went there. The other members of the family that should be at this mechanic's house are gone, and they're not about to come back anytime soon, so it's just a build-up of bad luck that has led her to be there. So I've avoided this for a very long time because I absolutely love dogs, and I just don't want to see evil dogs. I don't want to see dogs die in movies and stuff, which is so prevalent. But Sam did talk about Cujo on his channel, so I was like, you gotta get it done. So it is sort of a standard Stephen King novel. He has very rich characters that have they have rich interior lives and exterior lives. There's a lot going on. There's cheating, there's people who are worried about their children's futures, worried about their own futures, feeling like they've wasted their lives. And while the main sort of event of the book is this mother and child being trapped in this car, there's a lot surrounding it that really fills out the pages. What I wasn't expecting in this was there to be a supernatural, paranormal kind of element to it. From the very beginning, the young boy, his name's Tad, he's terrified of his bedroom closet because there seems to be some sort of a monster in there, and it seems to be the spirit of this serial murderer who was killed in the town of Castle Rock a few years earlier. I think this is it's the character of Frank Dodd, who was the bad guy in The Dead Zone, and this all happens in Castle Rock. You don't need to have read The Dead Zone before to read this or anything, but he did sort of just kind of creep in there, and he's kind of on people's minds, which is fine, but he sort of implies throughout the story that the spirit of Frank Dodd is also compelling Cujo with his rabies. It's not just the horrible disease that's driving him crazy, it's also this strange serial killer's soul who's pushing Cujo to do these things, and it isn't as fully explained as it normally would be in Stephen King stories, and it just seemed like it seemed almost like a red herring or something. Like, you think something more is going to happen with it, and then it doesn't, and it just turns out to be rabies. That's all it is. I didn't find it scary. Obviously, to be in an actual situation like that, absolutely, that would be terrifying, but because you actually get certain points from the beginning of the story where you're actually inside Cujo's mind and he's just thinking about doggy things, I kind of just fell in love with Cujo, and I just felt really sorry for him, because animals or people with rabies, it's such a horrible thing. It just takes you over. It makes you incredibly thirsty and yet terrified of water. It makes you so violent and just turn on everyone around you, and it just seemed really sad. It in no way was his fault. At the end of the book, Stephen King even has a paragraph where he specifically says that Cujo was always a good dog. It wasn't his fault. You know, it was just this rabies that did it to him. But I just didn't get the paranormal part of it, and while, you know, being stuck in a car with a kid and trying to keep both of you alive, that's definitely a harrowing experience. It just wasn't scary for me. And I actually watched the movie last night as well. Again, the movie wasn't scary to me either. I was more grossed out because it looked like they'd put like custard or like cake icing all over the dog to make it look like his eyes were running with pus, and it just kind of made more than puke everywhere. But it just wasn't scary for me. I don't know what it was. I think maybe because it's a Saint Bernard. I don't know, maybe if it was a German Shepherd or something, it would have looked a bit more vicious, but when he didn't have his mouth open, Cujo just looked really sad, and that made me sad. I'm definitely still glad that I read it. It's absolutely one of Stephen King's classics, so it wasn't a bad book at all. I enjoyed it. I wouldn't put it up there as one of his scariest books, but it was definitely well written, and there were definitely a lot of characters in it. The ending, I have to say, I wasn't expecting. I feel like I've been saying that a lot lately, but I kind of thought I would already know where this goes, but no, there was definitely something that I just was not expecting, and I knew they weren't going to do it in the movie either. I knew they definitely were going to change that ending for the movie, which they did, but yeah, so that is Out by Natsuo Kirino and Cujo by Stephen King. So thank you so much for watching. You should definitely go and check out Sam's channel. I shall be back tomorrow with a new video. Thank you so much for liking and subscribing, and let me know down below if you've read either of these novels, if you have anything based on these that you think that I would like or that I should read, and I shall see you in tomorrow's video.